Welcome back to This is Baseball. I'm Brandon Johnson. So, it is almost September, and playoff races are in full swing. Now, this week I want to take a closer look at the American League Central. That's the division that I honestly pay the most attention to. That's where the Kansas City Royals play, so I focus a lot of my my time on that. So right now in the American League Central, we have a really close race. It's a 3-team race between the Guardians, Royals, and Twins. All three within 2.5 games of each other. But before we get into that, I wanted to just kind of take a look back and see how we got here. So at the beginning of the year, when we previewed the season, it was, a lot of people are like, okay, the Twins are going to be favorites in this division. And I felt like the Twins were going to be competitive, but I felt like the Royals and Guardians and Tigers were all going to be in on it. In fact, a lot of people kind of thought that the AL Central was going to be a little bit weak, which historically it has been, so that's a fair mindset to have going into the season. But we had reason to believe that the Tigers and Royals would take steps forward this year. Unfortunately, the Tigers haven't, but the Royals obviously have. Guardians have been incredible as well all around. They've been the best team in baseball for multiple stretches of the season, and the Royals have been working on a historic turnaround. Last season, they only won 56 games, and they are on pace to win 90 or 91 games this year. That would obviously be a 30 to 35 game improvement on their win-loss record. Now, when we started the season for the Royals, it was, can they win 75 games, 76 games? Can they go 500? Can they be competitive? Can they keep us interested during the season? They've achieved all of those things. They're going to finish this season. They're going to finish the season above 500. They're likely going to be a playoff team, whether it's wild card or division winner. But the thing was, that's a lot to ask. Turning a 56-win team into a playoff team, that's a lot to ask. It's not something that's very common. Well, you look at this team, and most of the players that were on last year's team are no longer on the team. If you remember, they only brought back 7 players from 2023 to be on the opening day roster. It would have been 8, but Michael Massey started out on the injured list. But anyway, with the fact that only 7 players returned, they added Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha, Seth Lugo, who is a Cy Young candidate and very well could win the Cy Young. They added Michael Wacha, who's been very serviceable this year. Cole Ragans, who the Royals traded with the Rangers, traded Aroldis Chapman to the Rangers for Cole Ragans. He's been great and has lived up to the expectations. Brady Singer is back to playing at a really high level and bringing in depth with Hunter Renfroe, Will Smith, who has playoff experience, and then extending Bobby Witt Jr., who would be the MVP if Aaron Judge didn't exist. Aaron Judge is having a fantastic season and honestly has a chance to win a Triple Crown. So in any other season, Bobby Witt Jr. would be far and away the MVP. It wouldn't even be close. But you have Seth Lugo, who you brought in to be serviceable. You didn't expect him to come in and be this Cy Young caliber pitcher that he's been, so that's been a pleasant surprise. And you have Bobby Witt Jr., who isn't surprised, or we're not surprised to see that he's playing at this level. That's the player that everybody thought that he could be and will continue to be. He got that big extension in the offseason. Vinny Pasquantino came back. He's healthy. He's producing at a high level. He's one of the top offensive players in the league. Salvador Perez as well, having a great season. So you have your core players doing really well. You have a pitching staff who, if you look at the Royals last year, their pitching staff as a whole was really bad from starting all the way into the bullpen. Starting pitching has been great, one of the best in the league for the Royals. Bullpen has been one of the things that has been a huge question mark, and they've had a lot of trouble getting right. Trading for Lucas Erceg at the trade deadline has brought some stability to the Royals bullpen. There's still some questions up in the air. John Schreiber has been good for them, but outside of that, it's been ups and downs. James MacArthur, Angel Zerpa has been, you just kind of cross your fingers and hope everything goes well when he steps on the mound. But anyway, we have about 30 games left, and the AL Central is incredibly close. Like I said earlier in the show, 2.5 games separate each teams. Actually, the Royals and Guardians are currently playing right now. The Royals are up 4-1 in the 7th inning. So by the end of the night, the Royals are either going to go back to being 2 games back of Cleveland, or they're going to be tied for first place when this episode airs. I will let you kind of fill in the blanks based on what happens with the result of that game. I wanted to wait to record this, but that game went into like a 2-hour delay, so I had to get this done. Anyway, they'll either be 2 games back or tied for first. And now I want to kind of look at the schedule for all 3 teams, the Royals, Guardians, and Twins, in the remaining schedule. So, like I said, all 3 of these teams basically have 30 games left. So, and in those 30 games, they still have some head-to-head matchups against each other. In fact, if you look at it this way, the Royals have 7 games remaining out of those 30 games against the Twins and Guardians. All of those are going to be very important games for obvious reasons. The division is on the line, and the possibility of being a wild card team is also on the line for all 3 of these teams at this point. The race is too close to be able to say one way or the other of who's going to finish where in the standings. Guardians have 8 games remaining against the Twins and the Royals, and then the Twins have 7 games remaining against the Royals and Guardians. So 7 or 8 games out of 30 left are head-to-head matchups, all important for every team. But let's look at the schedule as a whole. So I'll start with the Royals, and I'm really looking at strength of schedule, who has kind of the easiest path. And looking at it, none of these teams necessarily have an easy road. I actually think the Royals have the toughest schedule remaining. They have 18 games out of those 30 games remaining against teams that are above 500. Once they finish with the Guardians here, they're going to play Houston, and Houston are inevitable. I think they're looking to go to not only the playoffs again, obviously they're going to win the AL West at this point. The Seattle Mariners have folded, but they're on a quest to go to, I believe, their eighth straight ALCS. So they're they're in their own league with that. But after the Royals finish in Houston, they play the Guardians again for the final 3 matchups against them, and then play the Twins. And then after that stretch, they'll go on the road to New York and play the Yankees, and their schedule will lighten up a little bit, actually a lot of it, because they'll play Pittsburgh, Detroit, San Francisco, and then Washington, and then close the season against the Braves, and that's probably going to be a very important series for the Braves as well as the Royals, because, I mean, at this point, every game is super important when you get down to this stretch in the season. But if the Royals can get to September 11th and survive and tread water, they have a 12-game stretch against teams that have already thrown in the towel. So really, that back half of September, the Royals have an opportunity to rattle off some wins. And one thing that the Royals have been good at this season is beating teams that they're supposed to beat. So I expect them to perform really well during that stretch. Now, moving on to the Guardians and Twins. The Guardians and Twins both have 14 games remaining on their schedule against teams above 500. And we'll start with what the Guardians have going on. So obviously, they got to finish up with Kansas City here. Then they'll play Pittsburgh and then play the Royals again. Then they get the Dodgers. And they have White Sox, the Rays, and the Rays, aren't having the season that we have come accustomed to seeing the Rays have. They're under 500 right now. But then they have 4 against the Twins, and then 3 against the Cardinals. And the Cardinals have really fallen off a cliff lately. The team that looked like they were going to turn their season around and be a lock for the playoffs are now falling out of contention, are probably going to miss the playoffs entirely. They play 2 against the Reds and then close the season against the Astros. So a little bit different than what the Royals have going on. Like I said, Royals have a really tough stretch and then lightens up for a couple of weeks for them, where Cleveland is going to have, tough series, lighter schedule, tough series, easy matchups, tough, and then so on and so forth. It's going to be just kind of every other series is going to be against a first place team or a team that's fighting for a playoff spot right now. But let's move on and see what the Twins have going on. Now, the Twins are currently 2.5 back in the standings, and they have a lot of work to do to be able to get to the top of the division. But it's not impossible for them because, like I said, they have 7 against Cleveland and Kansas City. Both of those teams are ahead of them. And obviously the easiest way to climb back in the standings is beat the teams inside of your division. But Minnesota is currently playing the Braves. They've already lost the first 2 in that series. Play the Blue Jays this weekend. Then the Rays. Then they go to Kansas City and see the Angels and Reds. Then 4 against the Guardians. Then 3 against Red Sox, Marlins, and Orioles. So similar. It's kind of back and forth as far as who they're playing. But really a tough second half of September for them with that 4 against Cleveland. Boston, who is really trying to hold on and get into the wild card right now. That could be a really important series between Minnesota and Boston as far as wild card implications. But after Boston, they go play the Marlins, who are having a terrible season, and then have to finish the season against Baltimore. Baltimore is vying for that 1 seed, that first round bye. Who's to say that the Twins won't be in that conversation? Because I think what's interesting about this season is there's no team in either the American League or National League that's really just running away with, like, they're the obvious 1 and 2 seeds. They're the obvious teams that are going to get that first round bye. They're not going to have to play in the wild card round, the wild card series. But whether or not you want to have that first round bye is really up in the air, and honestly a discussion for another time. If you ask the Atlanta Braves, they don't want to have that first round bye because ever since that has been implemented, Atlanta's been the best team in the National League and has not been able to beat the Phillies. But again, conversation for another time. But I think we have a very fun September regarding the American League Central, with the Cleveland Guardians, Kansas City Royals, and Minnesota Twins. Again, 2.5 games separate these 3 teams right now from first place. So there's going to be a lot of drama down the stretch, and honestly, must-see baseball from all 3 of these teams. And I think all 3 of the teams that I've been talking about are going to be playoff teams. I think they'll be in, and I think that that's funny that the American League Central is so weak, and here we are with 3 really good ball clubs in the American League Central. So, and I think that's the beauty of the expansion of the playoffs as well, as you have more teams involved, because, obviously if we didn't expand to 6 teams in each league making the playoffs, the Twins would be on the outside looking in right now. Obviously they're in the playoff, they'd be in if the playoffs ended today with the expansion. So I really like that, that it's opened up to have more teams invested in this late in the season. So, again, a lot of good baseball left, but that's all I have this week. So, thank you for listening. I will see you next time.